Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving headfirst into the eerie digital footprint and the massive cultural fascination surrounding what has to be one of the most chilling urban legends of our time. We're unpacking a fascinating piece of source material that digs deep into a story I almost guarantee you've heard in one form or another. You know, the kind of tale that used to survive by word of mouth and around campfires, but has now totally evolved to conquer the modern digital landscape. We're going to break down the exact anatomy of this legend, look at the actual hard data behind our obsession with it, and figure out exactly why this very specific brand of highway horror just refuses to die. So, let me ask you a question. Have you ever picked up a hitchhiker only for them to mysteriously disappear without a trace? Just let that sink in for a second. This is the exact chilling question drawn right from our source material, and honestly, it serves as the absolute perfect psychological hook. It forces you to put yourself right there in the driver's seat. Picture it. It's incredibly late, pitch black outside, the road is totally empty, and you decide to do a good deed for a stranded traveler. But then, the impossible actually happens. And that brings us to the true kicker of the lore, leaving behind only fear and unanswered questions. Our source makes a really great point here. The horror of this legend, it isn't a cheap jump scare or some gruesome Hollywood monster, not at all. It's the chilling, lingering psychological aftermath. It's that absolute shock and utter confusion of an encounter that just fundamentally breaks the rules of reality as you know them. You're left totally alone in a moving vehicle, forced to grapple with the absolute unknown. It really sets a moody, intense atmosphere for what we're going to analyze today. Okay, let's get into the phenomenon itself, what our source calls a true global ghost story. First things first, we need to establish exactly what we mean when we talk about this phenomenon. The core definition, highlighted by our source, describes a widespread urban legend featuring a mysterious traveler who is picked up by a driver only to suddenly and inexplicably disappear from a moving vehicle. Now, I really want you to focus on that word widespread. This is absolutely crucial. We aren't just talking about one isolated incident reported in a single, sleepy, small town. No way. This is a recurring, truly global narrative. We're talking different cultures, different continents, across entirely different decades, yet this exact same story structure just keeps popping up, sending chills down spines all over the world. It really taps into this universal human fear of the unknown passenger. So, how does this story actually work? Let's look at the anatomy of the legend and the patterns of these phantoms. Our source material points out that these encounters aren't just random. They follow a very specific, consistent structure that forms the backbone of the entire folklore. First off, a mysterious traveler is offered a ride. So you have this element of simple goodwill that gets completely turned upside down. Then the passenger suddenly disappears without a trace. But here's the detail that truly elevates the legend. The disappearance happens from inside a moving car. I mean, it literally defies physics. They don't just, slip away while you're parked at a gas station. They vanish into thin air while the doors are locked and the tires are actually spinning. And finally, the driver is left in utter shock and confusion. When you analyze the countless reports out there, this exact four-step formula is almost always in play. Now let's talk about some famous highway phantoms, these local legends that have achieved a truly massive reach. What's super interesting is that we can actually quantify the cultural impact of this folklore now. We aren't just dealing with vague friend-of-a-friend stories anymore. Take the Uniondale Hitchhiker from South Africa, for example. That specific legend boasts a staggering 599,000 views in the related digital ecosystem. That's huge. And then you have Resurrection Mary, which is perhaps the most famous American version, originating right out of Chicago, pulling in a very solid 207,000 views. This perfectly illustrates how localized, specific versions of the Vanishing Hitchhiker have successfully made the jump from whispered hometown rumors into massive modern digital folklore. It turns out, giving the phantom a name and a hometown dramatically increases our fascination with them. Which naturally leads us to the big unanswered question. Is this fact, fiction, or something paranormal? This is the central debate our source material wrestles with. On one hand, you have the perspective that these are just mere spooky tales. This viewpoint suggests these encounters are simply the product of folklore, highly active imaginations, maybe just totally exhausted drivers hallucinating on long, dark roads, and the natural evolution of urban legends. Basically, it's just our deep psychological need to share a really good, scary story. But on the other hand, we have the paranormal phenomena perspective. This viewpoint asks, well, what if there's a deeper truth lurking beneath the surface here? What if these are real, unexplainable, and genuinely haunting encounters with something totally beyond our understanding? Our source poses this exact question without actually taking a side, completely leaving it up to you to decide where you fall between the power of human imagination and the genuine possibility of the supernatural. Let's contextualize this a bit by looking at the broader digital horror ecosystem and really quantifying this fascination. Looking at the metadata surrounding our source, it reveals a frankly massive, incredibly hungry online audience. It's not just about hitchhikers, you see. It's a whole interconnected web of related subgenres. People are out there actively seeking out true mountain horror stories and Appalachian Trail anomalies. They're searching for late-night trucker encounters and general highway horror tales. So what does this actually tell us? Well, it shows that the Vanishing Hitchhiker isn't just some weird, isolated niche. It sits right smack in the center of a much larger, highly engaged ecosystem of people who are endlessly fascinated by the terrifying things that might happen the second we leave the safety of civilization and venture out onto lonely roads. And when we ground this folklore in actual, comparative numbers, the results are pretty mind-blowing. Remember those view counts we talked about? The Uniondale Hitchhiker sitting pretty at 599,000 views and Resurrection Mary at over 200,000. Now compare that massive engagement to a much more generic topic, something titled, say, 3 Disturbing True Highway Horror Stories. That one is sitting at just 61 views. 61. This proves a really vital point about human psychology and the way we consume stories. Audiences vastly prefer specific, named legends with a real sense of history and place over generic, nameless night drive horror. We don't just want a scare, we want the lore. We want a ghost with an actual identity. And then there's the number 3,290. This represents the actual view count on the specific foundational source material we've been analyzing for this explainer. Complete with its digital tags like #paranormal and #urban-legends, this number shows us something super important. It proves that even these deep-dive, highly analytical looks at really old legends continue to draw a dedicated and deeply engaged audience. The digital footprint of the Vanishing Hitchhiker is very much alive and well, proving for sure that our cultural fascination with this specific highway phantom isn't fading away anytime soon. Which leaves us with one final thought to ponder as we wrap up today's explainer. What might be lurking on your next night drive? Seriously, the next time you're driving down a dark, completely empty road and your headlights happen to sweep across a lone figure standing on the shoulder just waiting for a ride, are you going to remember the patterns of the phantom? Will your mind immediately jump to Resurrection Mary or the Uniondale Hitchhiker? Because whether you believe it's entirely a psychological phenomenon or a genuine paranormal encounter, the legend has already done its job. It's planted that little seed of fear and wonder right in your brain. Thank you so much for joining me on this structured dive into the unknown. Stay curious, stay observant, and safe travels out there.